Some murder cases seem straightforward at first. A tragic death, a concerned witness, an ordinary arrest. But every so often, an investigation takes a turn that no one sees coming. In this compilation, we'll revisit 4 extraordinary cases where the truth unfolded in unexpected ways. From Kayla Hodgson to a Good Samaritan who became a suspect, a teacher whose behavior during arrests stunned investigators, and a teenage murder plot that came dangerously close to becoming reality. Each case reminds us that first impressions can be misleading, and that sometimes the most shocking twists are hidden in plain sight. Let's begin. She looked like the kind of person social media was built for. Bright smile, luxury trips, rooftop parties, late-night city lights. In photos, Kayla Hodgson looked fearless, free, and completely alive. Her Instagram was filled with energy. Beaches in Tulum, parties in Miami, nights in New York, laughter with friends. To most people, she represented youth, confidence, and possibility. But behind one of those glowing photos, someone else was watching, scrolling, obsessing, comparing, and eventually destroying. On July 13, 2022, police officers entered Kayla's apartment in Tamarack, Florida, and walked into a nightmare. Blood covered the floor. Blood stained the walls. Her small dog Dior was trapped inside, frightened and alone, waiting for a voice that would never return. Kayla Hodgson was dead. She had been stabbed 37 times, and investigators would soon discover that this was not a random attack. It was the final explosion of a digital obsession that had been building for more than a year. Kayla was often reduced online to a simple label, bottle girl. But the people who loved her described someone completely different. They said she was magnetic, the type of person who could walk into a room and immediately make strangers feel welcome. Her cousin later told the court that Kayla had a rare ability to make insecure people feel seen. If someone sat alone in the corner, Kayla would talk to them. If someone was struggling, she would help them. She was loyal, protective, and deeply connected to her family. Her nightlife work was not just about parties and money. It was about energy, connection, presence. She made people feel important, and that light attracted attention, including the wrong kind. Sakina Thompson first entered Kayla's orbit through a man named Terrence. What started as jealousy slowly transformed into something darker. Investigators later uncovered months of messages, fake accounts, stalking behavior, and emotional fixation. This was not simple anger. This was obsession. Sakina watched Kayla's life through a screen for over a year. Every photo, every trip, every tagged post, every interaction with Terrence became another wound in her mind. Social media turned comparison into poison. The more Sakina watched Kayla, the more she seemed to hate what Kayla represented. Freedom, confidence, beauty, attention. The very things Sakina felt she was losing in her own life. And while Kayla was surrounded by friends, co-workers, cousins, and supporters, Sakina appeared increasingly isolated. That contrast became impossible to ignore during the trial. Kayla's courtroom benches were filled with grieving loved ones. Sakina often sat alone. No support system, no warmth, just silence. Investigators later revealed that Sakina's obsession escalated far beyond social media jealousy. She allegedly used prank calls, anonymous messages, and fake online identities to psychologically torment Kayla before ever touching a weapon. The phone became her first weapon. The knife became the second. In July 2022, Sakina boarded a flight from New York to Florida. That decision changed multiple lives forever. Prosecutors argued that this was not impulsive. It was planned. Surveillance footage showed Sakina arriving at the airport, checking into a nearby hotel, and moving through the city with purpose. Then came one of the strangest details in the entire case: the shoes. A resident near Kayla's apartment later described seeing a woman dressed in black wearing expensive designer sneakers. Investigators compared surveillance footage with Sakina's social media photos and identified the shoes as Prada Cloudbust sneakers, worth around $1,200. The same shoes that appeared online as a symbol of status and image became evidence in a murder investigation. That irony perfectly reflected the entire tragedy, a crime fueled by appearance, comparison, and obsession, eventually collapsed under the weight of digital evidence. But the most powerful evidence was something far more human. DNA under Kayla's fingernails. Even in her final moments, Kayla fought back. That DNA told investigators a story no lie could erase. It showed struggle, resistance, survival instinct. Kayla did not quietly disappear. She left behind the evidence that would identify her killer. Investigators also discovered signs that Sakina tried to clean the crime scene afterward. Prosecutors said she changed clothes, moved through the apartment carefully, and attempted to hide evidence before leaving. But panic was mixed with calculation. The crime scene felt staged and chaotic at the same time. At trial, Sakina Thompson claimed she acted in self-defense. She testified that Kayla attacked her first. Then came the question prosecutors could not ignore. How does someone stab another person 37 times in self-defense? How does someone clean up afterward? How does someone walk away instead of calling for help? Jurors listened carefully, but the physical evidence painted a far different picture. The wounds were excessive. The violence was personal. And Sakina's calm demeanor during graphic testimony deeply disturbed many people in the courtroom. Some family members later said what haunted them most was not just the murder itself, but the lack of remorse afterward. During victim impact statements, Kayla's loved ones spoke directly to the woman who had taken her life. They described Kayla as light, not perfect, not famous, but genuinely good. One relative said Sakina spent years staring at Kayla online because she wanted what Kayla had. Yet instead of building her own happiness, she chose to destroy someone else's. Another painful truth also emerged during sentencing. The only person who truly benefited from the toxic relationship was the man at the center of it all. While two women destroyed each other emotionally and physically, he walked away alive. And then there were the silent victims. Dior, Kayla's little dog, reportedly declined after her death and eventually died not long afterward. Family members believed the animal never fully recovered from losing its owner. Then there was Sakina's child, born while his mother sat behind bars, a child who entered the world carrying the consequences of hatred, violence, and emotional destruction before ever speaking his first word. But Kayla's family refused to let the story end only with tragedy. Her cousin Andrew, a military veteran, reportedly turned grief into action by helping teach self-defense classes for women. For the family, healing meant transforming pain into protection for others. And maybe that became Kayla's real legacy. Not the Instagram photos, not the headlines, not the courtroom footage, but the reminder that kindness leaves echoes long after violence ends. This case was never just about jealousy. It was about what happens when insecurity becomes obsession, and when social media stops being entertainment and starts becoming emotional surveillance. A block button, a telegram message, a tagged photo. Tiny digital moments eventually became part of a homicide investigation stretching 1,500 miles across the country. Kayla Hodgson lost her life because someone allowed envy to consume their humanity. But even after death, Kayla's light remained stronger than the darkness that tried to erase it. And in the end, that may be the one thing her killer could never destroy. Kenneth Herring's family did not remember him as a dangerous man. They remembered him as Ken, the older brother who joked too much, the man who teased his sisters and called one of them Biscuit Head just to make her laugh, the uncle who checked on family members before checking on himself, a hard-working 62-year-old who spent years doing physical labor in air conditioning and mechanical repair jobs. But on May 7th, 2019, the world stopped calling him Ken. He became the drunk driver, the fleeing suspect, the dangerous man. A 21-year-old woman claimed she had to stop, and within minutes, he was dead on the side of a Georgia road. At first, Hannah Payne insisted she was the real victim. Her attorneys described her as a brave young woman trying to protect the public after witnessing a hit-and-run accident. They said she feared for her life. They argued she never intended to pull the trigger. But prosecutors saw something very different. Not self-defense, not heroism, not courage. They saw a young woman so convinced she had the right to play police officer that she ignored warning after warning until another human being ended up dead. That night began with a traffic accident near Interstate 285 in Clayton County, Georgia. Kenneth Herring ran a red light and collided with a semi-truck. Witnesses immediately noticed something strange about him. His eyes appeared reddish and unfocused. He looked confused, disoriented, like he did not fully understand what was happening around him. One witness, Terry Robinson, believed Herring might have been suffering from diabetic shock, a serious medical condition capable of causing confusion, panic, and erratic behavior. But Hannah Payne interpreted the situation differently. To her, Kenneth Herring looked dangerous. She called 911 and waited with others at the scene while police were supposedly on the way. Nearly 20 minutes passed. Then, suddenly, Herring got back into his truck and started driving away. That should have been the end of Hannah's involvement. Instead, it became the beginning of a tragedy. The dispatcher repeatedly told her not to follow him. Not once, not twice, multiple times. By that point, Hannah already had the truck's license plate number. Police were already responding. She had all the information necessary to let law enforcement handle the situation. But Hannah Payne made a decision that would change two families forever. She decided she would stop him herself. This is the moment where the line between witness and vigilante disappeared. At just 21 years old, Hannah had recently received her concealed carry permit. She legally owned a Springfield handgun and believed she was capable of protecting herself and others. But somewhere between concern and control, something shifted. Her actions no longer resembled caution, they resembled authority. The prosecution later argued that Hannah was not acting out of fear, she was acting out of arrogance, the dangerous belief that she had the right to enforce the law herself. And the most damaging part? She ignored direct instructions from emergency dispatchers while continuing the pursuit anyway. She followed Kenneth Herring for nearly a mile. Then she cut him off with her Jeep. An older man who may have been suffering a medical emergency suddenly found himself trapped by an armed stranger screaming at him to get out of the vehicle. Witnesses later testified that Hannah's behavior was aggressive from the moment she approached the truck. Not calm, not cautious, aggressive. One witness recalled hearing her scream, "Get the F out of the car." Others described her cursing repeatedly while confronting the 62-year-old man inside the truck. The defense later attempted to portray Hannah as someone politely trying to help. But eyewitness accounts painted a completely different picture. A young, armed woman escalating an already unstable situation. Then came the gun. Hannah claimed Kenneth grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the truck. She insisted the firearm discharged during a struggle and that she never intentionally fired the shot. But prosecutors focused on a simple reality. None of this would have happened if Hannah Payne had not introduced a loaded weapon into a roadside confrontation she created herself. Experts later discussed the mechanics of the Springfield pistol. It was not a weapon known for randomly firing without deliberate trigger pressure. The defense tried to create doubt about whose finger pulled the trigger. But prosecutors argued something more important. The person who escalated the situation was Hannah. She chose to chase him. She chose to block his vehicle. She chose to approach him with a firearm. Every step moved closer to violence. And eventually, violence arrived. The bullet struck Kenneth Herring in the abdomen. He later died from the wound. But what disturbed many people even more than the shooting itself was Hannah Payne's behavior afterward. Witnesses described her calmly changing clothes near the scene after the shooting. Others said she showed surprisingly little emotion while talking to police. One witness later testified she had no remorse. Even the 911 call sounded chilling to many listeners. At one point, Hannah reportedly stated that she was safe, but Kenneth was not. Meanwhile, Kenneth Herring was bleeding inside his truck. The courtroom battle lasted years. By the time the trial finally began in late 2023, prosecutors had assembled an overwhelming timeline of decisions, showing how a concerned citizen transformed into the aggressor. The prosecution focused heavily on Hannah's changing story. At different points, her descriptions of the shooting shifted. Earlier statements suggested her finger had been near the trigger. Later testimony attempted to distance herself completely from firing the weapon intentionally. The defense tried one final strategy. They argued Terry Robinson, the off-duty corrections officer at the crash scene, had encouraged Hannah to follow Herring. But prosecutors reminded jurors of something impossible to ignore. The dispatcher repeatedly told her to stop, and she refused. 5 days of testimony eventually led to the moment that changed Hannah Payne's life forever. The jury found her guilty of malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and firearm charges. When the verdicts were read aloud, Hannah lowered her head and cried. But for Kenneth Herring's family, the tears changed nothing. One of his sisters later told the court, when they closed that casket, that door never opened again. The judge sentenced Hannah Payne to life with the possibility of parole, plus additional consecutive years. A young woman who once believed she was doing the right thing would now spend decades behind bars, and Kenneth Herring would never return home. The case also fueled larger debates across Georgia about citizens' arrest laws and vigilante behavior. Critics argued the tragedy exposed how dangerous it becomes when ordinary people confuse suspicion with authority. Because this case was never just about a traffic accident, it was about control, ego, fear, and what happens when someone mistakes personal judgment for legal power. 2 lives were destroyed that night. One man lost his future forever, and one young woman lost nearly all of hers because she believed carrying a gun gave her the right to decide who deserved to be stopped. Sometimes people convince themselves they are protecting the world while becoming the very danger they claim to fear.
At first glance, she didn't look like someone facing serious consequences. Sitting in a courtroom under the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, she leaned back in her chair, arms loosely folded, her expression calm, almost amused. When the judge spoke, she listened, but there was no visible fear, no trembling hands, no anxious glances. Instead, she gave a slight shrug, as if the entire situation were an inconvenience rather than a turning point in her life. To some observers, her demeanor seemed confident. To others, it felt unsettling. This wasn't how someone acted when they were about to face the full weight of the legal system. What no one in that room knew at the time, at least not the public, was that she believed she had already won. In her mind, the most damaging pieces of evidence were gone, deleted, erased, buried somewhere in the digital void where secrets are supposed to disappear forever. She thought she had covered her tracks, and that belief shaped everything about how she carried herself. The case had started quietly months earlier. There were rumors at first, whispers that didn't seem to have enough substance to be taken seriously. But as time passed, those whispers turned into formal complaints. Then came an investigation, and eventually charges were filed. Even then, she didn't panic. Investigators began gathering information, interviews, timelines, digital footprints. The process was slow but methodical. Every detail mattered. Every inconsistency was noted. But when they looked for the most direct form of evidence, messages, communications, anything that could clearly show intent, they came up short. At least that's what it seemed. Because when authorities first examined her devices, they found nothing substantial. Conversations that should have been there were missing. Entire threads of communication had vanished without a trace. It looked clean, too clean. From her perspective, that was confirmation. She had done what needed to be done. Deleted messages, cleared logs, wiped anything that could tie her directly to the accusations. In a world where so much communication happens through phones, it felt like removing the evidence was the same as removing the truth. So when the case moved forward and she found herself in court, she wasn't afraid. She was prepared. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was filled with quiet tension. The prosecution was ready to present their case, but from the outside, it wasn't clear how strong that case really was. Without direct evidence, everything depended on testimony and interpretation, and testimony can be challenged. That's why she remained composed, even when her name was called, even when she stood before the judge. There was a quiet confidence in her posture, a sense that she understood something others didn't. When questioned, her responses were measured, controlled. At times, she even appeared dismissive, like someone who believed the situation had been exaggerated beyond reason. And then came that moment, the slight laugh, the shrug. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was noticeable, a subtle gesture that said, "This isn't as serious as you think." A signal, intentional or not, that she didn't feel cornered. For a brief moment, it seemed like she might walk away from it all. But courtrooms have a way of revealing what people think they've hidden. As the proceedings continued, the prosecution asked for permission to introduce additional evidence. There was a shift in the room. Small, almost imperceptible, but real. The kind of shift that happens when something unexpected is about to unfold. Then it happened. The texts surfaced. Not fragments, not vague references, but actual messages. Clear, direct, and impossible to ignore. Conversations that had supposedly been erased were suddenly back, reconstructed through forensic analysis and digital recovery methods that most people don't fully understand. Because in reality, deletion isn't always destruction. Data lingers, it leaves traces, and in the hands of experts, those traces can be pieced back together with remarkable accuracy. As the messages were read aloud, the atmosphere in the courtroom changed instantly. What had once felt uncertain now felt undeniable. The tone of the case shifted from speculation to clarity, and all eyes turned to her. The confidence that had defined her earlier demeanor began to fade. It didn't disappear all at once. At first, it showed in small ways: a tightened jaw, a slight shift in posture, a glance that lingered a little too long. But as more messages were presented, the weight of the situation became impossible to ignore. These weren't misunderstandings. They weren't taken out of context. They were exactly what they appeared to be, and they told a story she could no longer control. The same courtroom where she had once seemed relaxed now felt suffocating. The same people she had dismissed with a shrug were now witnessing something far more serious unfold in real time. For the first time, the reality of her situation became visible, not just to others, but to her. Cases like this often hinge on a single turning point. This was it. Before the texts surfaced, there was room for doubt. Afterward, there was very little. The narrative had shifted, and with it, the trajectory of the entire case. The defense would try to respond, of course. They would question the methods, challenge the interpretation, look for any possible way to weaken the impact of the evidence. That's what defense teams are meant to do. But some things are harder to explain away than others, and these messages were one of them. What makes this story so striking isn't just the evidence itself, it's the contrast between perception and reality. At the beginning, she believed she was in control. She believed that by removing the evidence, she had removed the risk, that the absence of proof would work in her favor. And for a while, it seemed like she might be right. But the truth doesn't always disappear just because it's been hidden. Sometimes it waits. In the end, the courtroom became more than just a place where legal arguments were made. It became a stage where assumptions were tested and illusions were stripped away. The shrug, the laughter, the confidence, all of it meant something different in hindsight. What once looked like control now looked like miscalculation. What once seemed like confidence now felt like denial. This story carries a clear and powerful message. You can't erase the truth simply by deleting the evidence. In a digital world, actions leave traces, sometimes invisible at first, but rarely gone forever. Technology has evolved, and with it, the ability to uncover what people believe they've hidden. But beyond the technical aspect, there's a deeper lesson. Underestimating the consequences of one's actions and overestimating the ability to escape them can lead to a false sense of security. That sense of security can shape behavior, decisions, and ultimately, outcomes. The moment she laughed and shrugged in court, she wasn't just reacting to the situation, she was revealing what she believed to be true. That she was safe, that she had gotten away with it. And that belief turned out to be her greatest mistake. Because when the texts surfaced, they didn't just introduce evidence, they exposed reality. And in that moment, everything changed.
Wait, they went through his phone? No, they're going to go through his phone. Oh my god. Yeah. Hey, what are you doing here? I thought it was just... gonna be arrested too. What? Why? Yes, I told him.
Inside the back of a Florida police car, two teenage girls sat side by side in handcuffs, laughing like they had just survived detention instead of being arrested for attempted murder. One complained she had not had enough time to do her makeup before her mugshot. The other joked about whether they would end up in the same jail together. Their voices sounded light, relaxed, almost excited. And that is exactly what made investigators uncomfortable. Because outside that patrol car sat an entirely different reality. Detectives had already recovered a 12-inch knife from a backpack. Prosecutors were preparing attempted first-degree murder charges. And investigators believed these girls had spent nearly 3 months planning to kill another student inside Lake Brantley High School. But somehow, to them, it still felt unreal. Lake Brantley High School looked ordinary from the outside. Crowded hallways, loud classrooms, teenagers rushing through another normal school day. Nothing about the campus suggested that hidden somewhere inside those hallways was a violent fantasy quietly growing stronger every single day. That is what makes this case feel so disturbing. The danger did not come from an outsider forcing their way onto campus. It came from two girls who blended perfectly into everyday school life. 15-year-old Isabel Valdez, known by some classmates as Jimmy, allegedly developed an obsession with Adam Lanza, the Sandy Hook shooter responsible for one of the deadliest school massacres in American history. But investigators say this went far beyond curiosity about true crime. Over time, Valdez reportedly immersed herself in online communities that glorified mass killers, spaces where murderers were analyzed like celebrities, where violence became aesthetic, where infamy became something admired instead of feared. Inside those communities, tragedy slowly transformed into mythology, and eventually, reality itself began to blur. According to investigators, Valdez convinced herself that killing another student could create what she described as a supernatural blood bond with Adam Lanza. She allegedly believed murder could spiritually reconnect her to him. It sounds irrational, impossible, completely detached from reality, but that distorted belief became the emotional center of the entire plot. Police later revealed disturbing writings allegedly connected to Valdez, describing the planned killing almost like an act of devotion. Not hatred, not revenge, devotion. That detail changes everything, because it reveals something deeply disturbing, a teenager who no longer viewed death as horrifying, but as proof of loyalty to a fantasy she had built inside her own mind. And the target was not random. Investigators say Valdez specifically chose a male student because she believed he physically resembled Adam Lanza. For weeks, she allegedly memorized his class schedule, followed him through school hallways, and secretly photographed him without his knowledge. This was no longer teenage fantasy. It had become surveillance, preparation, predatory behavior, hidden beneath the appearance of an ordinary student. And Valdez was not alone. Authorities say 14-year-old Lois Lippert became deeply involved in the planning process. According to police reports, Lippert helped sharpen the 12-inch knife intended for the attack. Investigators claim she even tested the blade against her own skin to check how sharp it was. Police also discovered disturbing drawings reportedly created by Lippert, images depicting the victim dead while Valdez stood nearby. According to prosecutors, Lippert also helped prepare supplies for the attack: latex gloves, flowers meant to be placed beside the body, cigarettes intended to be smoked afterward while waiting for police to arrive, cleaning materials. That final detail may be the most disturbing of all, because it suggests the girls were not only imagining the murder itself, they were imagining the aftermath too. Almost like they wanted the crime to become a performance, something unforgettable, something that would make them part of the same violent mythology they had spent months obsessing over online. According to investigators, the attack plan itself was horrifyingly specific. The victim would allegedly be forced into a bathroom stall inside the school. Valdez reportedly planned to either stab him in the stomach or cut his throat. Afterward, investigators believe the girls intended to perform what they described as a blood ritual, and then they would wait for police. Think about that for a moment. These were teenagers discussing murder with the emotional detachment of people planning a school project, and the gloves and cleaning supplies made the situation even darker. Even though they allegedly expected to be arrested afterward, they still prepared items to wipe away evidence. Not because they believed they would escape, but because the act itself mattered more than the consequences. Then everything changed because of one anonymous message. On the night before the planned attack, someone submitted a warning through the Fortify FL safety app. The message was simple but urgent. A student planned to kill someone at school the following day. That single decision may have saved a life, maybe several lives. The next morning, police searched Valdez's backpack and found the knife before the alleged attack could happen. Both girls were arrested immediately, but the story became even darker once the patrol car footage was released. Inside the vehicle, the girls laughed about prison sentences. They joked about becoming jail girlfriends. They discussed mugshots like they were preparing for social media photos. At one point, Valdez allegedly admitted she did not feel guilty for her actions. For prosecutors, those recordings changed everything. The defense later argued the girls were simply immature teenagers struggling to process fear and shock. But the footage told a very different story. The judge no longer saw frightened children caught in a terrible mistake. He saw emotional detachment, a chilling absence of remorse. And eventually, both girls were charged as adults because prosecutors argued they posed an ongoing danger to the community. But maybe that is where the true horror of this story actually exists. Not only in the knife, not only in the stalking, not only in the violent fantasies hidden behind school hallways, but in the collision between teenage imagination and irreversible reality. The internet did not physically hold the weapon. It did not walk through those hallways. But somewhere between obsession, isolation, and online glorification of violence, two teenagers slowly lost the ability to separate fantasy from humanity. And if one anonymous student had stayed silent for just one more night, this story might have ended with a funeral instead of an arrest.